Hi, welcome back to the Freese Watches channel. So the subject of today's video is the simple question, why do people like vintage watches? I think we all take it for granted that vintage watches are obviously attractive in their own right, but I thought it'd be useful just to have a look at a vintage watch on its own in isolation, just look at the details a little bit more and really sort of look into this question because, you know, there are so many lovely new watches out there available. What is it about an older watch that has that charm and attraction? So I've got a couple of watches out that I was going to show you on the bench in a moment. So we'll pop over there and we'll take a look. Here we are over at the bench and here we have a very attractive Rolex chronograph from the 1960s. So this watch really does have a fantastic aesthetic appeal to it. It has the earlier Rolex case shape with no lugs, no shielded lugs on the crown. It's got a very nice slim bezel. It's got the Mercedes hands, a lollipop seconds hand. But on top of all these features, what is it that actually makes this vintage watch really attractive? And really it's the subtle details that come with age. The dial, it's not black anymore. The dial has got a slight sort of colour to it, and it's almost like a brassy colour. We think this is because that over time the pigment of the paint has weakened, and so you're starting to see the brass of the dial coming through there on the background. You'll also notice that on the lume plots, the lume is no longer sort of accurate and precise. It's quite puffy and irregular. And this is a very common feature on vintage watches. You'll see that the lume doesn't generally tend to be in a exact shape anymore. It tends to enlarge, and I think it's mainly because it absorbs moisture. It gets bigger, and this is a very good point. It's a point that you can see with this dial here. You can see that the lume plots are quite large. The lume's also obviously got a different colour to it. It's interesting when you see the watches that have got a pretend or sort of faux lume where it's sort of got a faux patina to it, that they have like a very kind of orange sort of colour to them. But quite often with vintage watches, you'll notice that the lume doesn't quite go that idealised, sort of toast colour. It tends to be a little bit different to that, and in this instance we've got a lume which is it's still quite a light colour, and it's almost got a hint of green to it as well. But once again, it's a nice feature of the vintage watches that these things can all vary, that no two watches are exactly the same. Now this is certainly a takeaway for us in terms of the way we make watches, because we are looking to produce watches that are all quite unique, and that's something that is quite common. It's something that we get with vintage watches, is the fact that they are all, of course, quite different in their appearance. There are some other details on this watch which are very nice and that sort of lend itself, give it that sort of vintage feel. For example, the font, the Rolex font, and the writing, and the gilt minute track. These sort of features, because of the size and the proportions of the watch, it does give it that. Obviously it gives it a feel of something that has come from the past, especially in today's world where we've been through a sort of period of really large watches being popular with the main manufacturers. Final thing to mention on this Rolex chronograph is the bracelet. It's an oyster bracelet, and it's a riveted bracelet, so it has the riveted panels on the side here. This is the design that we really like for our own watch. For our 101, the bracelet goes on the 101, and so we're actually fitting that bracelet ourselves. I mean, this is quite a common thing now that we live in this world where we're able to sort of draw from the past and take the best things, the things that we really like, and sort of include them in the things that we make today. So the next watch I'd like to show you is this Omega Seamaster chronograph. This watch has the caliber 321 movement made by Omega. It's a fantastic movement, but the main reason I wanted to show it to you was just to talk about the aesthetic appeal of a dial with patina. You'll see on this dial there's a number of different colours or tones on the dial where it's aged. This dial has probably got wet at some point in its life. You'll see that in the middle here it's quite dark. Towards the outside edge you can see some of the original silver colour. You can also notice that in this area here, for example, the minute track is missing. If you were to look at any of these items in isolation, they do look quite bad, and you'll think, oh, why would you want to have a watch that looks like this? But as an overall effect, when you're wearing the watch, the dial does look attractive. These sort of small features just all blend together to create an overall look to the watch, which is one that's very much is why we like vintage watches. Really, it's that appeal of something that is unique because of the way it's aged, that way it has character, the way it's not precise and clinical and clean in the way that you get with a new watch. These are things I think that a lot of vintage collectors like. I'll be interested to hear what it is that you like about a vintage watch, so if you'd like to comment below, then I'll be really interested to read your comments there. But for me, it's certainly about the way in which all these sort of elements add together to create a watch that has its own appeal. There are other things about this watch that certainly show its age. The lume in the hands is now practically black here. This is what happens when you get moisture in. The luminous material will absorb moisture and effectively lose its colour. It will discolour, it will age. In this instance, I think that this watch has had a fair amount of water in it in the past, and I suspect that the rust from the movement has come through with the water, so it's had dirty water under here, which has affected the dial on the hands. But I think that overall, once again, it does produce a unique effect. It's not something that you can try and replicate it, but ultimately, this it's really quite hard to substitute the way that this watch the way this watch looks now. So yeah, it's a very attractive watch there from Omega, and it's been obviously a pleasure to show it to you. Thanks so much for watching the video. I very much hope that was of some interest to you. I've always found vintage watches to be really attractive, and I do enjoy all the little details that make them special and make them stand out, in comparison to new watches. So I hope that it was useful to look at that in some detail, and also to compare it to one of the watches that I've made, and to see the way that we try and pay homage, as it were, to watches from the past, and sort of try and pick the best bits, as it were, to actually make what we consider to be attractive watches. If you haven't subscribed already, please hit the subscribe button and also hit the bell for notifications. We really appreciate all the subscriptions, all the comments. Please tell us what you want us to do. Stick any comments you like down below, because we're really keen to hear from you, and we want to be able to make content for the people who watch the channel, and hopefully stuff that you'll enjoy watching. So thanks again, and bye for now.